Hi, everybody. Hi, Laura. We are live. How
Good
are you?
morning, good afternoon in the UK.
Morning for you. So what time is it for you? 11?
11 o'clock.
11. And we were just having a conversation. Both of our hair, well, mine's definitely just gone like this.
We just feel a little unkempt today, but that's part of the fun of this. We're all trying to tackle our perfectionist tendencies.
We certainly are, but we're
So
doing it
you're seeing
anyway.
us in our pure form, just unpolished versions.
Yeah, just as we are.
Yep.
Just as we are. So I think we said today we'd talk two topics. So we were going to do imposter syndrome. And then you sent me one, I think, last week, didn't you, about toxic positivity?
Yeah.
Which one do you want to start with?
I think let's get toxic positivity out of the way because I think it'll help us talk about imposter syndrome.
Okay, go. So, toxic positivity.
So if you Google toxic positivity, you get lots of different definitions. But basically, in my perception, it's this idea that we want to sugarcoat things and be very optimistic, positive all the time, which is good. I mean, Kelly and I are both optimists. We're both positive people. But in HR, there seems to be this pervasive need to be so positive that we actually can't and don't talk about the tougher stuff because we're so afraid that like we'll be perceived as negative. So I get on a lot of calls with HR pros who say to me like, I don't want to sound negative, but I'm scared to say it, but I know this sounds bad, but, and I say, let's just take that judgment out. If we're actually going to like improve ourselves and our field, we have to kind of like shake this notion that we're always going to be on and always going to be, things are always going to be rosy, right? And I think it comes from that like unlearning we're doing of HR always being so, the cheerleader and the mom and the positive one and the sort of like caregiver, because as we all know, even moms and caregivers have to tackle the tricky stuff. It's not all. So it's a hard one because I think when we start talking about the messy work we have to do in HR, people get very uncomfortable because it sounds negative and they get like the wall comes up of, I don't really want to talk about this because it's not positive. And I'm like, we kind of have to do it. So what are your thoughts, Kelly?
Well, I suppose I'm in the same boat with you, and I think that'll probably lead on to what we talk about when we come on to a bit about the imposter syndrome. But I think if we're not really saying how we are, and again, I think this comes back to a lot of emotions, doesn't it? I think, and I've been doing loads and loads of stuff about kind of emotions and stuff at the minute. I don't know if one of the books I've got is here or at the office, but I think we seem to have got it to the point of like labeling like good emotions and bad emotions. And what I think where we need to get to is recognizing that we just have emotions and there's nothing necessarily good or bad about them. Actually, what I'm feeling today, if I try to ignore that and turn it into a positive or, and I think it comes back to some of the questions, doesn't it? And some of the conversations that we've had privately and live, like, how are you today? Like, I don't ask that unless I'm ready to hear the answer. But we know that some people will ask because it's just the polite thing to do. I don't really care how you are. So let's just brush it under the carpet, tick the box to say, yes, I've done it. And then let's just move on. Right. Because if you're going to give me the reality of how you're feeling and what you're going through, if I'm not ready to hear that, that might, you might impact my mood. And I think we've got to stop it. We've got to actually, like, today is really, again, like conversation we were just very quickly having before we came on. We may not be feeling our best selves today because of bad hair days and all those sorts of things. I've realized that, I've forgotten to put my lippy on. In the grand scheme of things, with everything that's been going on this year, like, that's a really small thing, but we're doing it anyway.
Right.
And we can say, I don't feel great today, I don't look great today, but I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah, and this notion that like in HR right now, every HR pro is forced to be really having like tough conversations. Like they're forced to face diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging. They're being forced to face a move to remote work when they've been in office culture forever. They're battling like really old school executives, and I say that as a term of endearment of like pulling people to a modern space, pulling people to a new way of thinking.
Yeah.
Those aren't like that's not a place of easily just kind of going positive all the time. It means that you sometimes have to call people out on things or address things or like actually kind of talk about what's going on. And I'm finding HR pros struggling so much with that shift of like, but I'm always the one that's like lifting up the room. And now I'm kind of forced to have the messy, icky, yucky conversation.
Yeah.
And so I do think this ties into what we're going to speak about now of like maybe why they're feeling this imposter.
Yeah, and I think like we also spoke, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it? I think where a lot of HR are at the moment also, I think we are in this kind of web of, and the only way that I can describe it at the moment is a bit like survivor's guilt, in that we've kind of got two ends of the spectrum going on at the minute, haven't we? We've got HR who are struggling to keep their jobs, or who have lost their jobs because of everything that's been happening this year, that are really finding it difficult. And not just HR, you know, we've seen it in talent, recruitment, L&D, engagement, all of those kind of people areas. So we've got kind of the job losses at one end of the spectrum, and then at the other end of the spectrum there are those that are still in businesses that are either thriving or surviving or growing. And it's kind of like, actually, it's like I would feel really guilty if I started to say that I'm really struggling this week, or that I'm really feeling the weight of everything this week, because I know there are all these people that are kind of losing their jobs. And so I think even more so, like, we're feeling like we've got to paint the smile on and show the world that, you know, we're doing a really good job, because we are in a good place in that we still have a job and we still have things to do, and we're still keeping it going. And yet it's still okay to say, despite all of the good stuff, you know, I'm grateful that I've still got a roof over my head, I'm grateful I've still got a job, I'm grateful that I've still got a team, I am starting to feel the weight of this.
Right.
Like, this is starting to feel exhausting, it's starting to feel heavy, it's starting to feel hard. That's okay to say, and acknowledging that, again, from a feeling perspective, from an energy perspective, like, I'm feeling it this week, last week and this week, I have been feeling it. That doesn't mean that I'm not grateful. That doesn't mean that I'm not, you know, proud of, you know, the fact
or
that
positive,
I've still got busy.
Optimistic. Right. It's like we somehow thought if we admit we're exhausted, we're also admitting that we're negative or pessimistic or like, and it seems to be really common in our space. I don't know. I mean, it's such a complex issue, but we have to challenge it. To be exhausted does not mean you are not positive. It just means you're a human being who's like hit a wall now and then.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in some cases, and again, you and I have been doing a lot of this year, just giving and giving and giving, you know, like, we've wanted to stay present, we've wanted to stay visible, we've offered help, we've offered support, we've given time for free, we've brought out new products, we've brought out new services, we've done all of this stuff in amongst this, you know, the same as everybody else. We've had no breaks, we've had no downtime, we've had no holidays, we've had no proper time away from work. And again, I think we were talking about the other week, weren't we, like, if we were to take time out because we need it, and because we're knackered, and because we're starting to feel the weight, if for any reason then our businesses did not survive because we'd taken that break, I didn't do everything that I possibly could during 2020 to keep my business going, and oh my God, like, the guilt of all of that. And yet there's something about the fact that if we keep pushing, you know, we keep putting the social media stuff out there, we keep doing lives, we keep talking to people, we keep doing all of this, there's almost something, and again, this is very similar for those that are internal and then self-employed, there's something about if we switch off, kind of like, we'd only have ourselves to blame if we lost our job or we lost our business or any of that sort of stuff. And recognizing that we cannot be on all of the time. Recognizing that we do need time out, recognizing that we do need to look after ourselves. And as you said, there's nothing negative about that. It is just, you know what, Laura, this week I'm knackered, and in between clients, I'm going to take some time out.
There was an HR pro in our Twitter network who recently tweeted that she talked to a business manager and admitted that she was feeling tired. And he had given her great advice and said, you know, reframe it in your brain. Just say, like, I'm looking forward to my second win. And she said it was great to get advice. She said it was great to get advice as an HR pro from the business. And it warmed my heart because I thought, how infrequently do we hear that? That an HR pro is willing to be vulnerable to the business and then receive some advice back. We're not the only ones who should be giving advice and giving wisdom, right? Everyone around us has something to teach us. And I love that she was willing to sort of go in there and just say, like, I've hit a bit of a wall. Any words for me? And like, I should message her privately. I haven't done that yet. Just to say, I've been thinking so much about that tweet. And I think it's like, this is where I wanted to ask your thoughts on imposter, because I think this is connected. First of all, why don't we define imposter syndrome for the community? Because I think that's
okay.
First.
So for me, if I can kind of get it into a nutshell. So for me, imposter syndrome, I suppose, is getting to a point in your life or in your career and then suddenly worrying, or maybe not suddenly worrying, maybe this is a kind of thought or a feeling that you've had all the while anyway, but getting a feeling of like, I now feel like I'm a fraud, like I shouldn't be in this role. People will uncover the fact that I don't have the skills or the behaviors or the values or the attitude or something, but now I'm here. There is a likelihood that I will be seen to be a fraud, and people will know that I should not be in this role.
Okay. And you and I are seeing this a lot in HR. I think you're even seeing it more than I am, which is interesting because I wonder if it's a New York thing that it's harder for people perhaps to admit it. So I'm curious, in your experience, are you finding HR pros able to articulate it, to say, I feel like an imposter, or where are you seeing it show up? How are you?
I think in lots of different ways. So I think it's definitely coming up in conversations. Now, I'm picking some of those. Different people are maybe having different definitions. That's my definition. Let's quickly see if we can get the Google definition up whilst I've got you on here. But, I think people are just, is coming up in conversations. And I think also in people's posts. So when people are talking about imposter syndrome, it's in the comments that follow, like, oh my God, I'm experiencing that. I'm feeling that. I'm doing something. So I suppose it's coming up more so as people are articulating it.
Yeah.
People are then like, right, that's me.
Okay.
You are talking to me.
Because I was thinking, I can only really remember one HR pro I talked to in my career. I like vividly remember this. I called her about a job that she was really perfect for. Like it aligned with her values, it aligned with what she was looking for next. Her experience was spot on. And when I called her about it, she said, I'm not ready for that. That job would be too big for me. That job would stretch me too much. And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, they're ready for you. They don't think that, and I don't think that. So you're the only one who thinks that. And she said, I appreciate it. I need to do work on myself to figure out why I don't feel ready. Something isn't allowing me to kind of progress in my career. Yeah. She was the only one I've ever talked to who was able to articulate it so clearly. I was so proud of it. It felt so authentic and just really, really self-aware. But I thought, gosh, that doesn't come up often for me. I wonder if it's coming up in like more subtle ways.
Yeah, and that may be like the description that you've just given there may have been a lack of confidence.
Yeah.
So,
which is very common for me.
Yeah. So I've got this definition up. So, imposter syndrome, also known as imposter phenomenon, is a psychological pattern in which an individual doubts their skills, talents, or accomplishments and has a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud.
Yeah.
Well, so I suppose the difference between this lack of confidence and the imposter syndrome is this, people will see me as a fraud.
Okay.
So I suppose let's talk some recent things that have been happening over in the US. And not, I don't want to turn this into a political conversation, but I suppose that's a bit, like Kamala Harris becomes vice president, and then like first week she's like, oh no, I don't like. What if people now start to think that I'm a fraud? Like, what if all of my experience and everything that I've done up to that, I don't think I'm quite ready. I'm going to start doubting myself. Like I'm not. What if my skills up to here are not up to anything? What if I'm seen to be a fraud? What if people start unpicking my career history? What if people start to doubt my skills? What if I
Yes,
start to
this would
doubt my
be
skills?
really, really not true because she is so qualified and she knows it, which is amazing. But she's a good example for us
Yeah.
as women of someone who
Yeah.
really is so
Yeah.
empowered and confident in her
Yeah.
expertise and skills.
Yeah. But
I think we
it's
could
that
all learn a
feeling
lesson.
of being a fraud. So if she were to get there and then be like, oh, like people might find out that I'm actually really rubbish,
Yeah,
that would be the difference between imposter syndrome.
but
Whereas,
see, then you have people like manipulating that, right? The other side who's kind of planting those seeds.
of course, yeah.
So I wonder, I know, I was just saying, actually, I feel like she could teach a course on how women can stand more in their power because she does it with such ease. I'm always sort of, politics aside, although I'm a big fan, she just explains her accomplishments really gracefully for me, where I don't feel like it's bragging and I don't feel like it's sort of coming from a place of insecurity.
Yeah.
I don't know why. So HR pros definitely have this, right? I wrote down pervasive fear, this lack of depth, like fear of lacking skills. They're doubting their skills. They're doubting their talent.
Yeah, and I've been thinking a lot about this since we said that this would be our topic of conversation for today. And I think I very quickly said to you at the beginning about a conversation that I was part of last week. So anybody that knows me in the UK will know that I'm not a fan of the CIPD. But I did on Wednesday. A contact of mine had arranged a Q&A with Peter Cheese, who's the chair. And there was a conversation that came up there about HR, and somebody said, I can't remember the exact comment, but it was basically that if we were to change what we're called, and I'm babbling here, but I think sometimes we focus too much on what we're called rather than what it is that we do. And so that was one part of the conversation. But somebody had put in the chat of this Q&A that if we were to call ourselves people, that would just confuse everything, because people know what HR do. And I kind of then went back to that. Actually, do people know what HR do? Because I still, I'm 22 years in and I still find myself on a lot of occasions having to explain what it is that HR do. And so since then, and about this conversation today, I've been thinking back to some of my coaching clients and some of the conversations that I've had, some of the conversations we've had, this conversation on Wednesday with the CIPD. And I think maybe is it because HR is really broad. Like, I've always been a generalist. I was always really pleased and proud of the fact that I was a generalist and I knew lots of stuff about lots of different things. I wasn't necessarily the expert in anything, but I could do lots and lots of things really, really well. And as I then got to HR director, I didn't need to have all of the details because I didn't need to get involved with a lot of the detail. But I did have an HR systems team. I had an engagement team. I had a training team. I had an OD team. So I had the specialists that work underneath me. But is there something around the fact, and I haven't got necessarily to the answer to this, but is there something about the fact, because HR is so broad, if I'm then asked to do something that maybe I haven't come across before, maybe it's TUPE, maybe it's mergers and acquisitions, maybe it's, a massively complex ER case, maybe it's furlough, during 2020, but is there that kind of feeling that if somebody asks us to do something that hasn't been part of our remit up until now, particularly, again, if you're an independent HR person, if you're if you are the HR person for the business, is there something about the fact that there is this breadth of this role and that we would then feel like the frauds or the imposters if our CEO or MD or whoever comes to ask us to do something that we've never come across before, and rather than have the confidence to say, actually, I've never done TUPE, I've never dealt with mergers and acquisitions, I've never dealt with this level of complexity of whatever this issue is, let's call in an expert. If we were to say that, are we admitting defeat?
Yeah.
And therefore we become even more filled with imposter syndrome, because it's like, I should know all this stuff. And people are going to work out that I don't know how to do my job, that I don't know how to do this properly, that I don't know how to do this, don't know how to do this, and don't know how to do this. So is that then what exacerbates it? So if you think of accounting, there are accountants, but again, in lots and lots of organizations, you will have tax specialists, you will have I don't know, VAT specialists, you will have management accountants, you will have accountants, you will have payroll specialists. And so we kind of divvy it up a little bit more, don't we? But actually in a lot of HR roles, unless it's a massive organization that has everybody is an expert in their area, we are expected to know it all. And is that making us feel even more like the fraud and exacerbating the imposter syndrome? Because until you've done it, you can't possibly know everything.
Yeah, this is so spot on, and I hope whoever's watching rewinds and hears that again, because I wrote down so many notes as you were talking. I think the theme is really, I should know this, right? And that comment that you, like that quote you said, it's like, I should know this. It's really, it stems from a fear. And again, no judgment, but I imagine many people hearing this, I certainly am myself, when you hear that, you're like, oh gosh, what am I fearing? Are we fearing job security, that if we don't know it, they're going to get rid of us? Or are we fearing like that they're going to really dislike HR even more than they already do if we don't have the answers? Are we already kind of coming from a place of scarcity, a place of fear, where we're like already yearning for that seat? We're already trying to like insert ourselves, and then any little mistake, we are going to crumble. And that's like a really weak position to be in. And it's kind of course, it's like a really delicate dance, and that's what we have to work on. We should go in there thinking, like, I'm not gonna, it's just kind of going in without that fear.
I think it is. So again, coming back to what we were talking about in terms of confidence and the person that you were just alluding to, I think if we can start with the confidence, like I know that I am a competent, confident HR professional. I know that. I know that I am a competent, confident coach in supporting HR.
Yeah.
I know that I could do recruitment. I know that I could do talent and acquisition. I know that I could muddle my way around HR systems. But actually, if I need an expert recruiter, I need to come to you. If I need somebody that's an expert in HR systems, I need somebody that's an expert in HR systems. If I need an HR expert project manager or program lead, I need that expert. There are things that I know enough of to get me started or to get me through. And in some cases, that might be enough.
I love that.
But there are also things that I know I would need an expert. I'm not an expert in employee engagement.
Right.
I can say what is needed in an organization in order for an organization, or in order for the people within the organization to be engaged. But if you want stats and figures and research and systems and touch points and whatever else you may need with it, that's not my bag. I am not an expert in employee engagement.
Yeah.
If you want an expert in TUPE, I am not an expert in TUPE. I am not an expert in mergers and acquisitions, but I know enough to get all of that stuff started.
And then like the thought stops there, right? You don't continue down the road of then self, like, you know, oh my gosh, I am the worst that I don't know this. You're not judging that lack of knowledge.
No. And I've had to grow that throughout my career. You know, like I've been really lucky with all of the organizations that I have, particularly where I was a generalist, because there were lots of times where I did just get thrown in at the deep end. And I know that happens to a lot of us in HR. We just get chucked in, and it is, you know, kind of, I suppose, teaching your child to swim, isn't it? You know, do you just put them in armbands and just throw them in the pool? Or, you know, do you kind of hold them for, you know, weeks and weeks and weeks until they kind of look ready for themselves? So I've had lots and lots of instances of kind of sink or swim. And, you know, we've talked about before, haven't we, about the fact that we are both overachievers. We are both overperformers. So from my perspective, like, I want to know how to do it. If you've asked me, I really want to learn. So either let me learn through experience, or let me research, or let me speak to somebody, or kind of do whatever. But I would never allow myself to get totally out of my depth. Like if it gets to a point of like, do you know what? I don't know. That's the point that we need to bring an expert in. And I think that's where lots of HR struggle. And I know we've both spoken about this. Why would HR need a coach? Because HR are coaches. Why do HR need help with recruitment? Because HR do recruitment. So when we're kind of having the conversations, it's like there are times you need an expert. Like, reach out to us, let us help you.
Yeah.
But
I
there is,
keep
oh no,
thinking about
I can't do
sports.
that.
Yeah, I keep thinking about sports. Like someone told me the other day, which I forgot about, that like elite athletes get more coaching. They get
Yeah,
more
yeah,
trainers.
yeah,
So like if you're at the top of your game in your sport, you don't suddenly say, I don't want any help anymore. You're actually, you welcome it, you embrace it, you seek it out.
yeah,
I find it odd that HR, but not odd, it's consistent with what we're talking about. They're afraid to embrace it because there's some fear there, some
yeah,
fear of job security
yeah,
or fear of not showing value. And I think that's what we really need to work on. Like you have value just by being in this profession. It is such a valuable, noble profession. It doesn't, even if you outsource like everything, you still have a role in the company
mm,
in terms of like building relationships and
yeah,
adding value.
yeah,
There's sort of this, I don't know, we're at the cusp of it where like we need everybody to just feel like you have value. And I think actually Kamala said something in her acceptance speech around, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically, women, when you're in a room and you feel uncomfortable, know that there are many of us in that room with you cheering you on.
yeah,
And I couldn't help
yeah,
but think of HR in that moment of like, I hope every HR leader watching this knows like Kelly and I are in there with you. Just even if you picture us being like, yes, ask for all of that external help you need and know that you still have value.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
the other thing that I think comes up for me with imposter syndrome, I think because and you and I have talked about this before, the buzzwords of HR and like kind of how there's so many of them.
mm-hmm.
But when I talk to people in HR who've been in the field more than 10 years, sometimes they feel the imposter syndrome because of these words that they're not as like familiar with, or like even for example the word strategic. I mean, it's so
Mm-hmm.
overused, right? I need a strategic HR business partner. We only want strategic people. We want strategic players. Well, when I define strategic with the hiring managers, they often don't know what they're saying other than the word. They don't really, they haven't taken time to define it.
Yeah,
And so when I talk to HR pros, and again, maybe not as explicitly in terms of imposter, but they'll say to me, I don't know, I've been an HR generalist for a number of years. I'm not sure I'm strategic. I don't, and I'm a little nervous that maybe I am more transactional. At least then we can have a discussion around it. Well, let's see how we're defining strategic. And maybe you
yeah,
are strategic and don't even realize you're
yeah,
strategic.
yeah. And that was going to be my point. So I've got a couple of coaching clients who have started working with me because they have been told by their CEOs or VPs that they need to be more strategic.
It's so
Right.
funny.
So, okay. So,
It's
yeah. So the business is going to pay for me to coach you, for you to be my coach. This is what we need. So we start to unpick some of that in the discovery call, and then we kind of go on and talk about it through the coaching. But I will guarantee you, 9 times out of 10 during that first conversation, what the HR team will say to me is it's just like, we're not a strategic organization. And there was one particular client before she started so we kind of knew, like, I've been told I need to be more of a strategic HR pro. Can you speak to my boss? So I spoke to this VP of people, had a conversation with him, and he's like, yeah, she definitely needs to be more strategic. Like she needs to get to a point where she can start, like planning like 6 months ahead. I'm like, so in terms of strategy in your organization, are you saying that strategy in your organization is a 6-month plan? Oh, well, and this VP of people couldn't even articulate what he meant by strategic. So from the HR's perspective, and she's coming on absolutely brilliantly. She will be the next VP of people. But the company has not defined what is meant by strategic. That doesn't mean she's not doing her job properly. She's doing everything that she absolutely should be doing. Of course, we've all got room to grow. We've all got room to develop. You and I are growing and developing and learning and stuff all the time. But if our businesses cannot articulate what they want from us, we cannot then expect the HR to just go, oh, yeah, okay, I know what that is. I'm going to go and do it.
Right.
But she could very quickly have fallen into I don't get it. I don't understand it. I'm a fraud. I shouldn't be in this job. I'm the wrong person. Rah, rah, rah.
Exactly.
And she didn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the biggest word that we both come across so often that makes people freak out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, what I would recommend that every HR leader sit down and literally write out, what does strategic mean to me?
Yeah.
Because it's a very vague word. it's like agile or nimble. I mean, there's so many other ones, but that one comes up the most, where I'm like, come on, you don't even want strategic all the time. That's not, depending on your definition, it may not, as you said, your organization may not be. Your organization might be super spontaneous and innovative and like, you probably don't want the 6-month plan in a company like
no. So there's all of those sorts of things. And I just think we've got to keep unpicking it. You know, I don't think I think we put a lot of kind of weight on our own shoulders. You know, I think we expect that we should know everything. And again, you know, whether this has been kind of born from the sector as a whole, whether this has been born from our professional bodies, you know, kind of wherever it's come from. But I think there is that, you know, as HR, you should know everything there is to do with people. And that's just, it's not, like I said, unless you've done it and learnt it and experienced it, you don't know everything.
Yeah. We literally have to like dismantle that, because it's this idea that we should know it all. Unfortunately, it's very common among women, and it's very common among marginalized groups of like, we have to do 50 times more to get, you know, potentially what men in business are getting. It's like, and it's exhausting. And I would say that the thing is to remember, if you're a woman in HR, as Kelly's explaining, like, it's not only you creating this, it's part of like how you've been conditioned and how you've been socialized and how we've been taught subtly or not so subtly. But like, it's time to stop it. Like, that's really how I feel about it. Like, it's okay to admit it. I think we have to acknowledge it. Oh, I suffer from a lack of confidence because I'm a woman in a very male-dominated business, and I think I have to know everything to deserve this seat at the table, or else they're going to find me out and they're going to just replace me with one of their friends. Like, that's a really common story we tell ourselves. So it's good to acknowledge it. Then it's good to challenge it and say, so what am I going to do about that? Like, I don't want to feel that way. It doesn't feel good.
And how can I change it? You know, what you were saying about, you know, kind of top athletes. Again, I wrote, I think you and I have been sharing a brain, I think, over the last couple of weeks. With similarities in terms of our posts. But, you know, I think I put something out last week. You know, when I first started my career, like, coaching was really saved for, you know, it was exclusive for chief execs and those sorts of things. But actually, it has become more. And from that sports staff perspective, I can remember Andy Murray, you know, from a tennis perspective, the year that he won Wimbledon, and, you know, they were talking about all of the different training and what he'd done and all of those sorts of things. Like, I know we're both big into yoga, but like, he was big talking about the fact that he got into yoga because actually it was a great way to lengthen and strengthen his muscles. So he had a yoga teacher, he had a nutritionist, he had a, you know, a strength coach, he had his tennis coach, he had all of these different kind of coaches and things to help him. You know, and even from my perspective, you know, personal training, I have a coach, I have a therapist, I have a, you know, somebody, you know, nutrition perspective. I have like a team of people that keep me allowing me to do everything it is that I'm doing. I'm not just like, you know, 22 years in HR, I'm a qualified coach, I don't need anything else in my life now. No, because again, like, the more I'm growing and the more visible and the more energy I need to use and the more I'm giving to everybody else, actually, I think I need more now than I did at the start of my career.
Yeah. It's weird. And this is a total like non sequitur, but I don't know, my brain's thinking about it, so I'm going to say it. You just had me thinking about like executive search, right? So there are a lot of people in my industry, because I do HR placement really at all levels. I mean, it tends to be more mid to senior, but I've always challenged that thought of like, why wouldn't you want an external recruiter for a more junior search? They're just as hard. And I've had a lot of like elitist kind of, you know, whatever, the pretentious crew of HR leaders come to me and say, well, if you're going to do executive search, you have to only do executive search. You know, it's a very different type of recruitment than all the other levels. And I've always challenged that, because to me, it's like, we all need a good service. All candidates, whether they're 5 years in HR or 25, they want a certain experience. All hiring managers need a certain experience. All recruiters, like, this notion that we sort of like, exactly, I guess it's just coming up for me because it's like this idea that some things are exclusive or elite or only for some, but not for all. Like, we're missing the point, which is like, our entire field needs X.
And I know, but again, like the point that you just made there, the last lot of senior, what's happening with sound?
You're fine.
Maybe a bit reverberating. But the last lot of the last HRD, senior HRD that I recruited, the amount of, not that I wasn't recruiting, but I was helping with the interview process. So there was a recruiter that was doing it, and they kept coming back, you know, people at this level don't want to give this level of information. People at this level don't want to do this. People at this level don't want to do that. And it's kind of like, if you like, so you want the big bucks, but you don't want to actually go through a process. But I know in some cases you will have designed 4 or 5 different interview processes and 3 different selection processes and all of this sort of stuff to find the junior people within your team. But again, it's like, actually, when I'm at this level, you should just have my CV, tell me how brilliant I am, and just kind of let me kind of go with it. And I do not, and I'm gonna caveat with here, I don't see that a lot in HR, because I do think, again, like, we want to have shown that we've gone through the process. We want to have shown that we are good at it. We want to have shown that we've displayed all of our skills. And so I don't see it very often in HR, but that one time really, really stuck with me because of the amount of people that were like, you know, if you can't think I'm good enough just by looking at my LinkedIn profile or my CV, then I'm not interested. Like, I'm not going to fill in like reams of questions. And, you know, if it's going to be more than 2 interviews, like, I'm not interested. And I just thought that's really, really interesting, given the process that we put so many other people through. And a big reason why so many of the people coming in at more junior levels are struggling to get into HR or struggling to get the progression, because we as HR seem to be expecting them to, you know, kind of give us the world in recruitment processes.
It's interesting, and maybe my brain is going there because I think of it almost like a pendulum. Like, on one hand, you have this imposter syndrome. I'm not worthy of anything. I have to just like prove myself over and over and over again, never feel worthy, never feel valued, never feel important. And then the other end of the pendulum is like this arrogance of, well, I am now an HR leader and I am untouchable and I am non-approachable. And, you know, until you're an executive, you won't get it. And we're sort of behind these. It's like all of that makes no sense to me. Like, somewhere in the middle is the sweet spot, right? This, I am confident and I am approachable. I am self-worthy and I am inclusive. I am, you know, strong and I am vulnerable. Like, this kind of in between is where we're, I think, as a field, struggling.
But I think that comes back to, you showed me your little pad before we started talking that says values alignment based on your video from today. And I said, again, I think we have been sharing a brain, because that's what I've been talking about, thinking about for the last few weeks.
So weird. Me too.
But I think some of it also comes to that. And again, I wonder if from an HR perspective, like, a lot of us go into HR with this view of like, I want to help people. Or I am a people person and I want to do this, or you know, kind of I want to do that based on, you know, from my perspective, you know, I want to change the world of work. That's still really relevant for me. I want to change the world of work. So, and that's kind of what got me in it. When I hit burnout in 2013, what I recognized as I came out of the other side of that is a lot of the work that I was doing, the environment that I was in, and the toxicity of the exec team that I was working with. My values were here, and yet the work was pulling me so far away from all of that. I think that added a lot to my burnout. And what's been coming more and more apparent to me over the last 7-8 years is that in order to, I need to be aligned to my values. Firstly, if I'm going to deliver great work. Secondly, if I want to change the world of work. Thirdly, if I'm going to continue to, you know, delivering everything that I'm doing. But that's really, really important to me. And I do wonder if from an HR perspective, again, and not to necessarily generalize, but I wonder if we go in with our values intact, because this is why we've joined HR in the first place. And more and more, as it becomes more about policy, or it becomes more about the exec team, or all of these sorts of things, we start to become pulled further and further apart from our values. And I think that's where we get to some of the point of, you know, well, I'm the most senior HR person. I don't need training. I don't need support. I don't need coaching. I don't need recruitment help. I don't need any of this sort of stuff. And then something clicks and it's kind of like, oh, actually, no, I need to come back to my values. And now, yes, I do want help and support and development and training. And I want to grow my network and I want to find out what everybody else is doing. but it feels there is this kind of like midway where something happens, because a lot of the time, you know, many of us will know when we get into the HR space, because we think, oh, it's all about people. And if we're not working in an organization where the exec team and the leadership team are putting people first, it becomes about policy, it becomes about disciplining people, it becomes more about the money. The amount of times I have sat outside exec boardrooms, either as, you know, HRD or as a consultant, where it's like, oh, can you present to the exec board today on this, that, or the other? And it's like you sit there all day and you don't get to go in and present your paper because people wasn't, you know, the people stuff wasn't important enough to speak about at the agenda. What message is that telling us? So again, what are all these kind of messages that are going round and around in our head? So actually, you know, and I've heard HR people say, you know, if you want to be if you're a people person, you don't want to go in HR.
Right.
Like that's that happening, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. That's moving away so far away from our values.
That message doesn't even like register with you and I. I'm always like, what do they mean? As if it's like exclusive. I know, but they're not. You can be people and heart focused and still be an executive and still be a valuable leader.
And still be commercial and still be focused on money and still be focused on service and still be focused on customers and all of that kind of stuff. We can do it. We are doing it. We have done it. But yeah, there is all of that sort of stuff. And again, I wonder at what point, I don't necessarily think we have, or we see, or we hear about the imposter syndrome stuff when our values are aligned. I think we hear more about it as we start to edge away from it. And it's all, you know, because it's kind of then like, should I be moving further away from my values or closer towards them?
Well, what's coming up for me when you're talking about this is this notion that there's also this external influence that impacts our imposter syndrome. And maybe we're too like permeable, is that the word I'm thinking of? Like we're like too sponge-like as HR pros of, oh, the executives think this about me, so I'm starting to absorb it and starting to feel it. When we can't really control exactly, we can a little bit, but we can't really control what the executive team or what people think about HR. That's a different training, that's a different lesson.
No, that's that,
is like, what do we think about ourselves? I mean, this was the whole Bamboo HR presentation I did of like, what are we saying about ourselves in HR? And so to tackle imposter syndrome and to get more confident and to get more sort of like in yourself as a professional, you have to try and look inward, not just blame everybody on the outside. Because sometimes
it starts with us. It starts with us.
Yeah. I hear it a lot. Like, well, it's my leaders who don't invest in me, or I get all of that. I'm not suggesting, I don't want to dismiss that, but like the harder work is to look inward and say, why am I not standing in my power? Why am I not asking for what I need and want? Why am I not even asking for it, just demanding it and requesting it?
Why am I not investing in myself? Why do I not feel worthy of investment? Again, that's something that we spoke about a few weeks ago, wasn't it? But why do we not feel worthy of investment? And again, is it because we feel that we have to have these 1,000 hats on all the time and that we just think that we should know it all? And so again, like recognizing that we need some help, or we need to talk to somebody, or we need to say, actually, I don't know this, could you just give me some time? Do we then fall back into the trap? Well then, but if I ask for this, people might then think I'm a fraud and I'm not capable of doing my job, and therefore am I risking my job by saying that I don't know something? And that comes back to your pendulum. It's that kind of never-ending circle, isn't it?
Yeah. And is that true? And like, if that is true, are there other places I can land, and are there other safe places for me to go that are more aligned with my values? Like, it's funny, I've been taking so many notes as we're talking, and I have like, we should know it all so many times. And I think if someone's suffering in HR with imposter syndrome, maybe they need to ask themselves, like, why do I feel I should know it all? Just start there. Why do I feel I should know it all?
Yeah. Or again, flipping that, why do I not feel comfortable? I don't know. Why am I not confident enough in myself that's making me get to that point of imposter syndrome? If, like I said at the beginning, like I know where my skills lie and I know where my skills don't, and I know where I need experts and where I don't need experts. I know where I kind of know where I can deliver something really well, and I know where I would pull somebody in. But in some respects, like it does take a level of confidence to say that's not my skill set. You need to be talking to somebody else.
Yeah. Okay.
And again,
So
we had a conversation weeks ago.
Yeah.
We had a conversation weeks and weeks ago, didn't we, about like being able to say no, setting better boundaries. Part of that also includes our skill set.
Yeah. I think that's so great. Like, that's not my skill set. I need some help. Maybe as an HR pro, you have to ask yourself, how would I feel if I said that? When I hear that, what comes up for me, right?
Yeah.
It's not so comfy to hear, but actually it's really important. And to your point of accountants, if you're a staff accountant and it's something a financial analyst needs to be doing or something that a bookkeeper needs to be doing, or gosh knows what other 40 titles are in that space, I don't even know, they would say confidently, that's not my skill set. I mean, lawyers do it all the time, even. Like, that's not for me. Let me bring in an external counsel. Let me get marketing people do it all the time. They say, oh, I think we need a creative designer. Let me hire one.
Yeah.
My friend, for example, she's in external event planning, and I ask her all the time, like, so when internal event planning companies or companies who have internal event planning groups, when they have to call you, do they have this guilt or shame about calling you? She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, in HR, if they have to call external help, they go through this whole emotional turmoil to get to the point.
Yeah.
She's like, not at all. They just go to their CEO and say, like, hey, we're doing an event. We're going to need external help. We're calling XYZ person.
Yeah.
Like, no big to do. And I don't know. I think this is related to Imposter, that it becomes a big to do to admit that's not my skill set. I need some help. Or that is my skill set. I still need external help. I just, for whatever reason, I need to learn. I need some support. I'm overwhelmed.
Because if I admit that I can't do that bit, what else might I have to admit that I can't do?
Yeah.
And maybe if I say 3 or 4 times, actually, that's not my skill set, that's not my skill set, you might then think, actually, I'm just not up to the job anyway. So you're just going to bid me off.
That makes me so sad, because it's probably a really common thought.
Well, it is, and like I said, when I got to HRD level, I didn't need to be an expert in everything. And I knew that. I wasn't there because I was really great at systems. I wasn't there because I was really great at engagement. I wasn't, I got to HRD level because of my leadership capabilities, because of my knowledge of HR, because of my generalist stuff. But, it was, most of that was about my ability to lead and influence and all of those sorts of things. It wasn't about so as HRD you now also need to be the expert in systems and recruitment and OD and talent and engagement and blah, 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 like everything else that HR is responsible for. I didn't need to do that, and I was happy to say these are the experts that I have working with me, that I work with. These are these are the experts. Speak to this person, speak to this person, and speak to this person. I had no issue with that whatsoever.
Yeah, but that was years of work you did on yourself, to get
it was,
to that.
and I don't also, like, I started my career in retail, and that's really where I then started to get into the HR side of things. But I think there's only there's only so far that you can go, like trying to sell somebody or help a customer in a department that isn't yours. Right, I can't answer technical questions about something that I don't know about. Like, if you want to talk to me about specs and, I can't help you. Right, here's the item. If you need more information, I'm going to go and find somebody to help you with that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if, because that's kind of how I started my career, like, let me find an expert to help you. Whether that then carried on throughout my career with me. I've never claimed to be an expert in everything.
Yeah, I know.
I'm
but
not an expert.
You are
in
pretty
everything.
unique in that. It's funny. I did a video on my YouTube channel last week on us versus them, because it comes up a lot in recruiting of, like, why would an internal recruiter hire an external recruiter? It's a defeat. Their job would be at jeopardy. They might say, that's what I'm getting paid for. I can't call an external recruiter. And it's Brene Brown always says, like, that's the story we tell ourselves. Like, or as both of us know from therapy, like, that's often a question of, is that true? Is that true? Right? That's like a common way to get you to say, like, is it? So, like, I often say to corporate recruiters when they say that to me, like, is it true that your job would be in jeopardy to use me, partner with me one time on a search? Or is it true that they would think you're less valuable if you had a partner? And you can tell they're like, no, it's not true, but I'm telling myself that. And then it's like, okay, well then why are you telling yourself that? What do you feel so insecure about?
Yeah.
And like when I asked my friend Jessica, who's in event planning, about it, and she said, it's not, I don't think in event planning there's an insecurity about getting external help. I said, well then it is, the more I think about it, it's something specific to the HR community that relates to all of this. Like it's fear.
And
it's
I wonder again, we've had this conversation. It is changing, but I don't think quickly enough. Is it because again, is it a gender thing? Is it because so much of HR is female focused? Is it because so many of the chief execs that HR have been reporting to since day dot are male, and that the responsibilities within, for the people function have just been actually that's HR's job? So is it because, is it a gender thing? We may or may not get the answer to that. Is it because too many execs have just, continued to just pass the buck to HR and not taken any responsibility? So over time, we become defeated by the fact that it's like we need senior engagement in order to make things happen. And you're still kind of like, we don't really care, it's an HR thing. So I think there's all of those sorts of things in there. And again, from a confidence perspective, and just as you were talking there about kind of the internal, external events planner, do we focus enough on the outcome and what is right for the customer or client, being our internal people, or are we in some respects like kind of fighting for somebody to say to, well done on that, Laura, like that was amazing? Like, is it more important that we get some feedback or try to get some positive feedback, or is it more important that we deliver? Because that internal external marketing that you were talking about, I would guarantee, like, this is your brief, this is the event that we need organizing, go make it happen. Actually, that's not in my skill set. I'm going to speak to Laura. Laura's a brilliant event planner. Laura's going to make it happen. Let's partner. Let's do everything that we need to do. When I do and I get asked this quite a lot. Like if I'm doing keynotes, my talk is not about me. My talk is about the audience. And if I am feeling insecure or lacking in confidence, or like, oh my God, like what if I don't say the right thing? Like if I make it about me, I cannot deliver to the audience.
Right.
The minute I make that talk about me, I can get nervous and it could all just fall to pieces. So again, from an HR perspective, when we're trying to hold on to all of this stuff, are we holding on to it because we want to be the people to try and make it happen, so that somebody might say to us, good job, Laura, that was brilliant? Or could we give it to you, give it to me, give it to this external person, give it to somebody else in the team, maybe even somebody else in the business, and just say, go deliver that, because that's not my skill set?
I love it. To bring it full circle, I think that would lessen imposter syndrome, because you would recognize the power of community, of partnership. You would recognize that you don't have to have all the answers, that none of us do, and that we get more answers when we compile a committee and really have like a team set up. And sometimes the team is half internal, half external, vice versa. It doesn't matter. The point is, you're not supposed to do it all by yourself. I think it's just too much pressure. You're absolutely right. It's like, and they're not always thinking what's best for the business. Like they're just, because it's such a fear-based, I have to hold my position strongly.
Yeah.
And it goes into delegation, right? A lot of HR leaders struggle to delegate, and it's all connected to this. Like, what do you have?
And again, that comes back to what we were talking about from a burnout perspective. And again, is part of this agenda thing, right? So when, like, let's say, again, we were saying at the beginning, weren't we, in terms of like me feeling like, I don't know, just a little bit run down, a little bit heavy over the last couple of weeks. But if I keep going and going and going, so I have to be the one that, is full on at work. I've got to be the one that's doing the washing, the cooking, the cleaning, the ironing, the picking the kids. There will become a point I'll just crash.
Sure.
And I can't do anything. But if I get to the point of like asking, family, other half, kids, whatever, actually, could you just do that for me? I don't have to take that. I don't have to be the one to do it all.
Yeah. And your value doesn't decrease.
Yeah.
Your value doesn't decrease. You don't suddenly become less than.
Yeah.
And that's
and I become more aligned to my values.
Of course.
because my values, exactly. And it's, so I'm doing all of that stuff. If I keep holding it all and pushing and just grabbing and going into like martyrdom, like I have to be the martyr, I'm going completely against my values of integrity because I'm not doing the right thing.
Exactly. We are enough and we are valuable as is. And maybe anyone in HR who's been feeling the imposter syndrome, I hope they know, like, we all do to a certain extent, but we hopefully gave you some tips here around how to question yourself and how to like think through it a little more. And it helps me to write. I took a whole page of notes today, but just to write out your thoughts and question it and see like what it's from. So I know we only have 3 minutes left, but I wanted to make sure that you tell people what we're wanting to talk about 2 weeks from today on our next one.
Yeah, so again, I think you've kind of alluded to it, haven't you, already in your us versus them video that you mentioned. But in 2 weeks' time, we are going to be talking, and we need to think of a title, but basically it is going to be the kind of us versus them. So the relationship between HR and all of the other people functions. So talent, recruitment, engagement, OD, all of those things, how we're all in it together. We've got to kind of stop this battle of my team and my team and my team and see that we are all in it together.
That's it. HR, we're in it together.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, because
that might be a title.
We're too siloed sometimes, and I'm hearing from a lot of HR pros that they're feeling really isolated in their organization for that reason. And they're starting to develop some resentment, some judgment, and it's unhealthy. We are in it together. The field needs to be more aligned with each other. And I actually just did a LinkedIn post yesterday about how, if you work in a certain function within HR, why don't you email or contact someone else in a different department of HR to talk to them? And it's funny how I think that's like a new concept for a lot of people. If they work in benefits, or they talking to their peers in employee engagement, in larger companies, of course, in smaller companies. Although in smaller companies, and we'll talk about this in 2 weeks, it's just as important to do it with other companies then and have HR peers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we want to make sure that HR pros know that, they're in it as a community and together, to stop trying to do it alone. I think it ties into what we're saying today. You'll feel less alone when you realize you're not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we are in the room with you.
That's the magic. We are in the room with you. We are cheering you on from the sidelines. We've got your back, and we will continue to have so. Awesome. So you can subscribe to this. So thank you everybody that has watched. Thank you if you're watching it on replay. So if you're watching it on replay, you may be watching on my YouTube, which is Kelly Swingler, or you may be watching it on Laura's YouTube, which is Learn with Laura HR. Did I get that right this time?
You did.
Yay. And if you want to find out about any of us, both really active on LinkedIn. Laura is much more active than me on Twitter, but she's got her tag under there. At Eastside Staff. And Instagram.
Same tag. Yep.
Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. You can find any of us on there. But yeah, if you've got questions that you would want answering for the next ones. So how do we bridge the divide? How do we stop the divide? How do we become more about one team? We're all in it together. If you've got questions about that, or if you've got particular issues that you are facing in your organization at the minute that you'd like to let us know about confidentially, and maybe we can tackle those in the chat for you, then again, let us know. Drop us messages, and we'll answer as much as we can for you. And on that note, we will leave it there.
Have a wonderful week, everybody.
And you, lovely to speak to you again.
You too.
See you later.
Bye.